Hi, I'm MarzGurl.
And I'm JoshKnightTheFirst.
And welcome to episode 15 of MokkoriPlay, the only podcast dedicated solely to all things City Hunter.
On today's podcast, we're going to cover episode 15 of City Hunter, titled, Ryo's a lecherous lecturer at a women's university. Protect the lovely lady.
I do want to point out that this episode correlates directly to quite a bit of the manga. They've jammed it all down into one episode, but it just so happens that I have volume 4 of what little was released of the City Hunter manga in English by Raijin Graphic Novels.
And this is years ago.
Oh yeah, super old, pushing 20 years ago now that this was published. They only published up to like volume 5, I think, and then they planned on volume 6 and it never came out, and they never printed the rest of it. So if you're ever looking for volumes 1 through 5, they're outrageously expensive. I managed to get volumes 3 and 4 for sort of not quite outrageously expensive. One of them was like $30, which is really more than you should expect to pay for a volume of manga.
For just one volume.
And mind you, volume 1 is pushing like $150 these days. And
damn.
That's ridiculous. But hey, if anybody out there ever runs across volumes 1, 2, and 5, and you're just feeling kind of generous, please let us know. I would really like to have the complete whatever was released in English out here.
It would help.
That would be nice.
Quite a bit.
Anyway, so yeah, this particular episode is covered in volume 4, and it's most of the manga. It is most of this volume. It's 7 of the chapters in this.
Almost 100 or over 100 pages.
No, almost 100
Almost
pages.
100 pages, okay. Almost 100 pages of story out of this one volume of manga, and we're distilling it all down to about 22 minutes.
Yeah, quite a bit of it is, just chunks of it are missing in this episode. Part of it for good reason, and another part of it is Ryo going, let me info dump exactly all the rest of these pages of the manga that we did not animate. But the rest of it is kinda shot for shot, panel for panel, looks pretty good.
So let's go ahead and get into it. This week our client is going to be a girl by the name of Yuko Kataoka. Now it is being requested of City Hunter that she be protected on behalf of Yotsuya, who's kind of a person involved with the company her father used to run. Her father being Yoshizo Kataoka, who has died recently and left the company kind of in limbo right now. The company could go to her stepmother, but we'll get more into that in a little bit. So, doing his due diligence, Yotsuya is looking in on Ryo to see, well, is City Hunter worth hiring? So he's hired a photographer to look in on Ryo, like literally look into the apartment. Ryo has picked up on this and is letting his freak flag fly by stealing some of Kaori's bras and just posing weirdly in the window wide open.
Yeah, he's wearing them, he's put them on his chest, then he's put them on his head, and I think it's more than just the weird poses. I think he actually is kinda into it.
I think he's enjoying it. He's enjoying himself too much.
Too much or not enough. One of the two. Like, he needs to decide, I either stop doing this or I just really lean into it. Just go all the way. But Kaori's pretty upset, of course, because it's her underwear.
Again.
And I don't know why at this point she hasn't picked up on, maybe he does have a little bit of an interest in me because he won't stop going through my underwear.
Which, at this point, I want to ask this question here, completely derailing talking about our case for the week. If you were Kaori, if you put yourself in Kaori's shoes right now, at a certain point, because you know that Ryo has a proclivity towards stealing your bras and panties, your good underwear, because as we've spoken about, Kaori buys the good underwear.
Yeah.
Would you start buying decoy underwear for him to mess with? That way he's not actually touching the stuff you actually wear.
I get the feeling that he's got a nose for the good stuff, and it wouldn't matter if I put the decoys out. He would find the good stuff.
I have to agree with you on that assessment.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter. It would be a waste of money.
Okay, just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
But that makes total sense, though.
But the cheap stuff is also the comfortable stuff, so, you know.
Yeah, but in Ryo's head, you think, well, she can keep her comfortable stuff. I want the high-end, lacy stuff. I want the expensive crap. Like,
yeah.
You had to go out, you had to save for these. That's the ones I'm gonna put
cost
on my head.
At least $60, if not more.
In 80s money.
In 80s money, yeah.
So once Yotsuya has figured out, okay, he's just dicking with me, he has a meeting with Ryo to formally invite him to go ahead and protect Yuko from the people that are trying to hurt her right now.
And it seems as though nobody else can really protect her because she's pretty shy of men, but there is maybe just one dude that she might not be afraid of, and that would be somebody who looks like Ryo. And Ryo, to her, looks like somebody that saved her when she was like 10 years old or something like that.
10 years ago, Yuko was involved in a kidnapping. She was kidnapped, and someone who looks strikingly like Ryo, but a little bit more like Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star.
I got that same vibe, yeah.
It kind of has that same vibe. Saved her, and in her mind, that guy who saved her is kind of her white knight. That's the epitome of what a guy should be in her head, and with good reason.
Mind you, they've got the same voice, too. Remember, it's the 80s. Both Fist of the North Star and City Hunter are on TV as anime, and both of them have the same voice actor.
Yes.
So, it's no surprise that she thinks, oh, he looks and sounds just like this guy. And he disappeared right after saving her from this kidnapping. She's never seen him since, although he did leave her some nice jewelry on.
A mysterious pendant.
Little pendant. It's like a locket.
Well, it's not really a locket.
You're right, it's not really a locket. It doesn't really open up.
It's like a gold coin necklace with like a little like gem in the middle. Mm-hmm. It's got like a weird, not quite the Prince symbol, like the artist formerly known as Prince.
Some sort of Celtic bullshit or something. I don't know.
The animators would probably just make it some, I don't know, squiggle something and put it on there.
Yeah.
There you go. So Ryo, after he has figured out, oh, Yuko is actually, one, beautiful, because he had to ask for that. He always does. And two is, oh, she's in college. I can work with
She's
that.
an adult. Thank God. Okay.
Yes, we're not dealing with little girls this week. Thank God.
Yeah.
He decides to go ahead and pose as an instructor there at the college he attends, which is Nikko Women's University. So he decides to go ahead and pose as a professor of social psychology, which I imagine he knows nothing about.
He teaches a grand total of 1 day in the anime, is what it looks like to me.
That's how it comes across.
Although in the manga, he's there at least a couple times.
Okay.
At least twice.
So let's say a week.
Yeah.
In the manga. Now, I love this part about him. One, the fit he's wearing. I actually really like what he's wearing.
Yeah.
You know, he's got these like pastel colors that he's wearing, but he's also, as part of his disguise, incorporated in, on Kaori's behalf, Makimura's glasses.
We don't know they're Makimura's.
They are totally Makimura's glasses.
He just said, oh, Kaori gave me these glasses, but the prescription's way too strong and I can't see all the pretty ladies in the room. They do look a lot like Makimura's glasses.
Totally his glasses.
But it also doesn't help that he has like the big 80s hair, and so he looks just like Makimura on top of that because of the glasses with the hair, and yeah.
And I'm not just saying that, he looks a lot like, if you look at old video of Bob Saget's stand-up from the 80s,
yeah,
it's the same kind of vibes.
Yeah,
the shaggy hair, the way the jacket's fitting.
He would do that through like 1993. That kind of hair would be like that.
Now, here's the other thing that you'll notice as he's there trying to quote-unquote teach the class. Again, it's a women's university, no dudes here. All the girls seem to think he's pretty cute.
Mind you, this is where there's a fairly big departure from the manga. I don't believe it is an all-women's academy in the manga, because there be dudes in the lunchroom after the class lets out.
And one big part that we'll go ahead and talk about here is the departure from what is shown here in the episode versus the manga, in that there's one notable, we can say, asshole, right?
He's an asshole. He really feels entitled to our lady ma'am, Yuko, and really wants to get with her, and all the other ladies in her class are like, hey dude, GTFO, and they dump lunch on his head. He waits for her after school.
When everyone's gone.
When everybody's gone, he waits for her in this empty hallway, and she keeps rejecting him, and he doesn't like that, and he
literally doesn't take no for an answer.
He assaults her. He throws her to the ground, starts tearing her shirt off. This is all in the manga, by the way.
Yes.
I just want to remind you, this is not happening in the anime. It's a big chunk that is not in this anime episode, but Ryo comes in and saves her from this assault. Mind you, what happens in the anime instead is they have toned this down quite a bit.
They've eliminated this character completely.
They eliminated the character entirely. There is no assault in the hallway, but she does get kidnapped by dudes in suits and who try to throw her into the back of a car, and then Ryo is like, haha, you thought you were kidnapping her, but it was me, and he kicks him in the face, and so she gets saved by him either way.
Yes.
But this time, there's no big kind of disturbing assault like there is in the manga.
There's no attempted sexual assault. It's just a regular regular kidnapping, thank God.
Thank God for normal ass terrifying strangers with an unmarked car.
And a knife.
Yeah.
Now, on top of all of this, Ryo is trying to play down the advances of the other girls who are clearly there, trying to feed him in the lunchroom, trying to, try and improve their grades in class, or they might be
legitimately into him, I guess.
Into him. It's entirely possible, which is Ryo's dream.
Right.
He's got women on the left of him, women on the right of him, and then in front of him there's Yuko, and he's like, damn it, I am in Mokkori hell. I can't say yes. And
which, I mean, all teachers should feel that way, that they should not say yes to their students in all scenarios. That should always be the case.
So it's the whole thing here that the girls at this university are under the impression that this is a professor there, and they are still openly hitting on him.
Yeah.
So it does not matter to them that Ryo is presenting himself as a superior, as a teacher, but then it's the whole thing of Ryo realizing, no, I know better. I can't do anything. And just the pain as he says, this is Mokkori hell.
Good. Quite frankly, just good. Let him feel that way.
Now, for just a moment here, I want to shift back to the case, and I want to talk about the person of interest that we are dealing with. Yes, we are watching over Yuko, making sure she's not kidnapped, as there are multiple attempts in the episode, but the person behind all of this seems to be her stepmother, who to me looks about, I know it's off by a couple of years, they animated her like Dana Carvey's church lady from SNL. She's kind of got the same glasses and hair.
Oh, she totally does, yeah.
Now, what we find out is that Yuko's stepmother, who of course was married to her dad, and now she's dead. Yuko's stepmother...
No, now he's dead.
Now
she's
dead.
Alive.
No, she's alive, and she's being blackmailed. There's somebody on the other end of the phone who she keeps talking with that says, all right, you're going to have to knock off your stepdaughter, and then you're going to get all that sweet, sweet money. And she's like, no, I don't want to do this. She's my daughter still. I don't want to do it. But she keeps going ahead with things and hiring people to go after Yuko. So she's only so conflicted right now, but there is conflict within her.
Sure.
She tries to play it off like she doesn't actually like Yuko, but in fact, she's quite fond of her, but she's there trying to tell her, oh, don't embarrass me. Who's this person you've brought home?
It's because she's brought home Ryo.
After he has just saved her from the two guys with the knife. And after she's given her this kind of dressing down in front of Ryo, this prompts Yuko to decide, you know what? I'm running away. I'm leaving home. Sensei, I want to live with you. And he's like, what?
And he's like, okay, that's cool. Until she decides to bring her entire house.
Her entire everything.
To his apartment, which, mind you, when I think of moving, which we've done a few times, we get a U-Haul, okay? And that's basically our entire lives. She's gotten, like...
a fleet.
12 18-wheelers.
No, it was more than that. She's got, like, all of the 18-wheelers that you would see on the news, just full of her stuff.
Wait, what news are you looking at that has more than 12 18-wheelers?
Oh, the ones up in Canada.
Oh, that's awful. I don't want to talk about that during City Hunter.
Well, thankfully, these are just moving trucks.
God, why did you do that?
Just to get the visualization. But anyway, she's got like this whole fleet of Amazon trucks. How about that? A ton of Amazon trucks.
No, because the Amazon trucks are smaller than 18-wheelers. Have you seen an Amazon 18-wheeler? They might exist. I've never seen them.
I've seen them on the highway.
Okay. She's got a fleet of Amazon 18-wheelers.
Yes, okay, we'll agree on that.
All right.
And they all show up in front of Ryo's apartment, this little red brick apartment that he's got, and he's like, no, we don't have room.
Send them back.
All right. And they all go away. Ryo has to have this heart-to-heart with Kaori of like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. This is rough. She's still gonna have to live here. What am I gonna do about it? And then at this point, Yuko walks in, and she's like, hey, who's that behind you?
Ryo's like, oh, that's my brother, Kaoru. Not Kaori. Kaoru.
Now, to his credit, Kaori has one of those names that very easily translates from one gender to the other, depending on, I guess, the ending syllable. But even then, I've seen a lot of female characters go by Kaoru as well. So that's kind of a gender-neutral name anyway.
It wouldn't have been if it was kaori, because kaori is fragrance.
The word kaori.
Yeah, well, when you're giving it to somebody for a name, that's an extremely feminine name. So no, he needed to change it to a name that sounded at least gender-neutral.
And of course, like it's becoming the trend in these last couple of episodes, Yuko buys it for about 5 minutes.
Until she walks in on Kaori changing, and she's like, what's the problem? You know, she's taking her shirt off, she's in her skirt, she's wearing a bra. And
a good bra.
Yeah, that same good bra is what it looks like to me. And Yuko runs out like, oh my god, why is your brother in a skirt and in a bra? Which I already think is kind of insensitive of her, but okay.
Because unfortunately, it's the 80s.
And more unfortunately still, Ryo has decided to say, alright, I wasn't gonna say anything, but you need to keep this a secret.
As it's translated there on the screen.
Yeah, so I'm using the word that is on the screen in the translation. Kaoru is a transvestite, but don't tell anybody. So see, what I would have done in this scenario, mind you, maybe the decision made here was, well, let's use vocabulary that was used in the 80s, and transgender was not so much used in the 80s, like that has become more common more recently, but I might have said transgender, also keep it a secret because she's not out to everybody yet. Like, I don't know, the whole scenario is kind of weird and kind of uncomfortable, but there's things I would have done differently, maybe.
Very differently to be more sensitive and a little more correctly adapting things to so as not to offend anybody.
Right, which
unnecessarily.
Which once again I think would not necessarily be censorship, it would just be putting a thing in its appropriate place.
Right. Mm-hmm. You can still try and present it, but be sensitive of the context.
Right.
Either way, Kaori is justified in thwacking him multiple times for saying this about her.
Right. Just at the very basis of just being misinformation about who she is. And it never gets corrected. The whole episode, it never gets corrected. But then, I don't think those two characters, Yuko and Kaori, ever interact again after that.
They do not.
Alright, so yeah, there's no reason for it to come up again.
Now, as Yuko is tending to Ryo's newly fresh wounds, because he says, oh, I just kind of fell and hit my face.
Oh, I just tripped down the stairs, whoops.
I tripped. Yuko remembers that her savior, her knight in shining armor from way back when, happened to have a scar on his chest.
Yeah, we're getting even further into those Kenshiro vibes. Do you know the man with the 7 scars on his chest? Oh, I've only got the one. Okay, well, the one's good enough.
Yuko does her best to try and get a little closer to see, well, is that scar actually there? Is there a way I can look at it without making it too obvious? But Ryo is already aware of this and asks, are you looking for a scar on my chest? Did your knight have a scar on his chest?
He's kind of trying to brush it off, too. He doesn't actually directly answer the question.
Well, what if I did have it? Like, he's being kind of, not quite obtuse, but he is kind of being a little callous toward her when it comes to her memory of this guy who saved her.
Well, also at this point, he's like, well, you just keep running away from stuff. Like, you ran away from me at school, and like, I'm not down with that. Like, if I'm gonna protect somebody, I want to protect somebody who's just not just gonna run away from everything.
Right, because you ran away at school, you ran away from your mom, you're seeming to running away from all your problems. Stop running away from things is the message he's trying to give her. A good message.
And so she immediately decides, I'm gonna run away again.
Like, literally the thing I told you, the thing to do, not that. What's the thing you do? That.
So she runs away crying, like, he didn't tell me whether or not he had the scar on his chest, and he chastised me. She runs away, and she gets her dumb ass kidnapped. Why? Because she ran. She did the exact thing she was told not to do.
Now, see, let's think about that for a second. If it's so typical of her to run away from her problems, I imagine the two guys who tried to kidnap her earlier in the episode, I think it's the same guys here.
Yeah, which, mind you, in the manga, this is the first time they show up, because in the anime, they replaced a salty on-campus guy with the two dudes in the suits and the car.
Right.
So in the anime, they show up twice. In the manga, this is the first time they're showing up to try to kidnap her.
So I imagine they're on some call with the stepmom, like, hey, we tried to get your stepdaughter, but she had somebody protecting her. And the stepmom's like, no, she's my stepdaughter. I know her well enough. Give it about 5 minutes. She'll try to run away again. You'll get another chance. All right. I don't quite... Oh, well, son of a bitch. There she goes. So all he had to do was wait.
Yeah. Yeah. But even then, even after they have once again kidnapped her, thrown her in the back of the car, they're driving down the road, suddenly Ryo, he's managed to get ahead of them somehow. I don't know how, because his car's not there. He's just in the trees ahead of them. And whee! He jumps down with his arms spread.
Like T-pose jumping out of the sky with his gun drawn, lands on the car, starts shooting through the hood of the car, and somehow when the car crashes managed to not go being flung 50 feet away. He just stayed on top of the car.
He's standing on top of the car as if he's got magnets in his shoes.
Like momentum means nothing to this man.
Yeah. So he's rescued her again, and in that moment where he goes in to rescue her from the backseat of the car, she's like, oh, guess what? There's that scar on his chest. He's actually got one. I am very convinced this is the same dude from my childhood that rescued me from the first of the 3 kidnappings I have now been through.
Like, we're gonna have to put a bell on her is what I would have done. But Ryo tells her, look, I don't want to be a knight to somebody who's running away. If you stop running away, if you say that you're gonna fight, I'll be your knight. And together, we can fight the fight. Let's ride.
You're making a Kamen Rider Dragon Knight joke.
Because that's me.
No, there is next to no crossover between Kamen Rider Dragon Knight listeners and City Hunter listeners. I can think of literally one other person that might be listening that knows both. Okay.
But I'm gonna do it anyway.
I'm doing it for that one guy. I'm doing it for that one guy.
I'm doing it for you.
Victor, if you're listening.
So after all of this, Ryo and Yuko need to get information out of these guys. So Ryo has the most elaborate setup for getting information out of somebody. So he's tied these 2 guys down.
Oh, the guys who had previously kidnapped
The
her.
attempted kidnappers.
The attempted kidnappers.
They're stripped down.
And he kidnaps them.
Right.
In retaliation to the kidnapping. He has kidnapped them, and you're right, he strips them down, ties them to the floor, and then covers them with chicken feed. And then he's like, guess what I've got in this cage? It's chickens!
And here, I'm going to give you guys 2 bottles of good old-fashioned nitroglycerin, which, if any of you have watched any sort of media, Wild Wild West or some other older media that would use nitroglycerin as a plot point, nitroglycerin is a very volatile compound that, if shaken enough, creates an explosion. So he's put 2 bottles, which I imagine they were probably decoys. He just had enough to demonstrate that I do have nitroglycerin.
I think in the manga it's actually nitroglycerin.
Oh, the manga pages confirm it is in fact nitroglycerin. Is that what you're telling me?
You know what? We don't know. Because we don't see them drop it.
I'm willing to bet he was bluffing. I'm not saying he doesn't have access to nitroglycerin.
Well, because he clearly did, because he used an eyedropper of nitroglycerin to go poof, and like a little bit explodes on the floor by their feet. So it's entirely possible he just used that much to be like, hey, do you really want to risk that there isn't nitroglycerin in these bottles, since clearly I have some?
Right.
So he's like, all right, you better tell me everything you know, or else here come the chickens. We're not going to tell you. All right, here come the chickens. Just pecking away at these dudes' nearly naked bodies.
I'm like, no, we'll tell you everything.
And it's here in the manga where we hear them tell him everything. We don't actually get all of that information here in the anime episode. Ryo decides to plot dump the entire thing later so that it's not nearly, it doesn't take up as many minutes.
But once they've gotten the information, they head over back to the mansion to try and go ahead and talk face to face with the stepmom, and she's got a gun and she's pointing it at Yuko like, I don't want to have to do this. Don't take another step closer. I'm like, no, Ma, don't do it. And then she turns the gun on herself.
Puts it under her chin like she's about to pull the trigger on herself.
And she pulls the trigger.
But the stepdaughter has come in and knocked the gun away from her face, and it goes out the window instead.
And so they're there kind of slumped together, crying like, don't do that. I won't have a mother left if you do that, which is true. Like, you would leave her with no family.
Right.
That'd be awful. I mean, it's bad enough that she's finding out you kind of were having a hit put out on her.
Yeah.
But it'd be even worse if she had no family.
So after this point, jumping to the manga again, there's still like another chapter where Ryo has to get a little bit more information. But instead, here in the anime, he's got all the information he needs. Like, I found out everything. You were being blackmailed because you said you were involved in a hit and run, and now these guys wanted to make sure that they had leverage over you, like puppeteering you for whatever they wanted. Well, turns out the body wasn't even a real body.
Well, it was
It was a real body, but she wasn't the one that killed the body.
Right, it was a body that had been stolen from the morgue, and they just kind of threw it in front of her car. She thought she hit somebody. It was dark. And now they've been kind of giving her these phone calls like, hey, this is what you're going to do. So now that Rio has given her this information, she's like, okay, well then who's doing it? Well, it turns out it's this guy that we only meet for one scene here in just a moment.
Yeah, there's more time with him in the manga.
Yeah, Sugijiro Akagawa of the Akagawa Group, who's a rival chairman to Yoshizo, her father, who is now dead. He's been trying to take over their company, and this was his way of making sure that happened.
Or
of setting this whole thing into motion.
At least being able to puppeteer this other company that he does not own.
Right. So, in order to make this stop, we've got to go to the top of the other corporation. So we got to deal with this Akagawa guy. And Ryo's like, don't worry, bet, I got this. So we see Akagawa just kind of grumbling in his own mansion, just, rah, 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 rah. We can't get this girl out of the way. We can't get the stepmom to do what we want. And he's outside having his coffee or tea or whatever, and then where's Ryo? He's in the bushes with a sniper rifle doing what he does best, and he's got the shot right between where you would hold the cup, the little notch where you hold the cup, and his mouth, and just perfectly lines up the shot.
Knocks the teacup out of the dude's hands, but he's still holding like the handle of the cup in his hand by itself, and he's like, you know what? I think I'm gonna let him go.
Yeah, you know, I'm good. I'm done. I'm good. We're out. Like, it was that easy. Like, all you had to do was punk him.
Yeah.
Just real quick.
And that's basically the majority of the episode. Ryo has left the family.
He's left the Kataoka residence.
But he took with him that little pendant thing that apparently he himself, 10 years ago, had in fact given to the girl.
Yeah, so he leaves the Kataoka residence and leaves a note saying, I'm just going to take back what I loaned out 10 years ago, confirming he was actually the knight the whole time. He was actually the person who had saved Yuko from the hostage situation 10 years ago.
Josh, how old is Ryo? How old is he?
Well, see, I didn't talk to you about that before the episode. Do we want to cover that particular factoid? Because that's actually a big plot point later on in the show.
The most I think I would like to say is nobody knows how old Ryo is.
Right. Nobody knows.
Yeah. It does get talked about. Eventually it comes up like, hey, how old are you? And everybody just kind of goes, huh? So it gets talked about in much greater detail after that. But regardless, nobody knows.
Really, the thing of it is that Ryo's timeline is kind of fluid of what happens when. Certain episodes will talk about events that are very important early on in his life before he became City Hunter.
His timeline is whatever the fuck Hojo has decided his timeline needs to be before showing up at the beginning of City Hunter.
Just because this is a thing that comes up a lot later. How many little girls did he come in contact with that will eventually develop crushes or complexes about him later in their lives? It's a lot.
It's at least this one.
And at least 3 more that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay. I don't remember specifically, but this is one.
This is one.
This is definitely
so
one.
You notch that one, and we draw back on that. Cody's asking for more information. Aren't you going to tell me about this? Like, no, I don't think I will.
You'd probably be jealous. What? No explanation.
And then Get Wild starts playing. And that's our episode for the week. So this one wasn't as funny, I think.
No.
As some other episodes. Action was kind of so-so. But next week, we're going to get a very Kaori-centric episode.
Yeah, I'm excited about that, actually.
We're going to have a friend come back. It's going to be fun with a flight attendant.
We are unfortunately now outside of my range of physical, legally translated copies of City Hunter. Again, we are very much open to receiving copies of volumes 1, 2, and 5 that were published by Raijin Graphic Novels that are now pushing 20 years old and are very hard to come by and are very expensive.
Yeah, so if you got a lead on that, hit us up.
I would love to have the companions to the upcoming episodes.
That would be very helpful.
So come back next time when we cover the 16th episode of the TV series, One Frisky Flight Attendant, The Tale of Instructor Ryo.
If you want to catch us outside this podcast, you can always find us both over on Twitter. I'm at JoshKnightTheFirst.
And I'm at MarzGurl. Thank you all so much for listening to our 15th episode of MokkoriPlay, and if you don't come back next episode, I'm going to use my judo skills on Josh.
Wait, what?